Hey Internet, welcome to my Battle of Alberta preview, and I have a special guest with me today. Joining me today is Zack Laing. He is the news director for Nation Network with Blue Jays Nation, Oilers Nation, and Daily Faceoffs. If you watch anything Oilers related, Zack is a great Twitter follow. His handle is ZJLAING. He's fresh from LTIR from knee injury, but his heart ready for a Battle of Alberta. Zack, thank you for joining me on such short notice today. How are you doing today?
Paul, I'm good, man. Thanks a ton for having me. And honestly, I don't know if my heart's ready for it. My knee is ready for it, so that's the good news. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a pretty nerve-wracking little bit here, to say the least.
All right. Let's just get into it right away. I just want to know like where you were at. What was your environment? Like, were you watching Calgary Dallas Game 7? Like, what was your reaction when Goudreau scored in overtime?
I was surprised. I mean, I didn't even believe it went in at the time. I've watched pretty much every game of the playoffs early on this year here, and that was one hell of a series between Calgary and Dallas. You look at the way Jake Ottinger played, and I think there was a lot of times where the Flames looked kind of lost a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They were having so many chances and just couldn't seem to capitalize. So, for them, it was a tough first round series, just like it was for the Oilers. So, I think both teams are kind of coming in a little banged and bruised, and I think the extra couple of days off for both clubs might help a little bit too.
For sure. I just wanted to ask about some round one performances from the Oilers. I know everyone will say like McDavid had a crazy series, and like that's like obviously that's a 5-year-old could say that. But do you have any personal shout outs that you felt like had an unappreciated series in round one?
Yeah, I think the one that jumps out to me right off the bat is Cody Ceci.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he stepped up big. I think he had, 6 points through 7 games. He's really developed into a top pairing defenseman for the Oilers very quickly this year. There was obviously a lot of question marks about him coming into the year with the past track record that he had. But, when you sat down and look at it, you say, okay, his time in Ottawa, he was forced to be a number one defenseman when at the time he was probably like a 4, 5, 6 defenseman, right? He gets a year in Toronto where he seems to rebound a little bit and very quietly, I thought he was great in Pittsburgh last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some underlying numbers that suggested that, he really seemed to turn a corner, so to speak, in his career. To step into Edmonton, initially in a top four role, second pairing, got elevated to play with Darnell Nurse a lot this year, and I thought they've looked great. And CC's a guy who I think really elevated his game to that other level, and I think it was a huge part of why the Oilers were able to get out of that first round series. Obviously, Evander Kane. I mean, what more can you say about him? Too 6 goals on his own, 9 points. He's looking like everything the Oilers wanted him to be and then some. So, for me, I think those are the two guys. And Kane probably isn't a guy who's maybe underappreciated. I think it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
apparent what he was able to accomplish, right? But, I don't know if there's been enough talk around the league about, the first round performance that Kane had himself.
Yeah, for me, I thought I'm a huge like every game I watch McLeod, I'm just like more I am just like in awe of how good he is. Same with Kulak. I was really happy when we got him at the deadline, and from an analytics standpoint, he was a better defensive um, defenseman than Sherratt, who went for like an arm and a leg. So considering that we only got him for a second, was like I'll take that any day of the week. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the way been able to elevate too, especially when Darnell Nurse has been out of the lineup late in the season there. And then obviously in game 6 where Nurse was suspended, I thought Kulak stepped up big in
Mm-hmm.
a really big moment. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's a guy the Oilers absolutely need to try to keep grounded. McLeod, yeah, you're spot on, Paul. I mean, what a tremendous young player he is as a rookie in the NHL. And he looks like he's a guy who's been there, done that for 10 years in this league
Mm-hmm.
already with the way he plays. So he's going to be a huge part of that depth forward group going forward.
All right. Next question. Uh, do you think, in your personal opinion, Dallas would have been a better matchup against the Oilers, or do you think we have it better with Calgary?
Yeah, I think Dallas probably would have been an easier matchup. I mean, Dallas gave the Oilers some headaches this year too. Like they played the Oilers hard. I think overall Dallas is a weaker team up front and through their defense. So, the big concern there would have been Jake Ottinger, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But the Oilers have their own super weapon in Connor McDavid. So do they kind of balance each other out? I don't know, right? Um, but yeah, I think Calgary's definitely the harder play. And at the end of the day, I was happy to play either one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Dallas and you say, oh, well, it's a restoking of the rivalry from, the
Mm-hmm.
1990s, which would be a great storyline of in and of itself. And then on the other side, you got a Battle of Alberta. And I don't know if I need to say anything more than that, right? I mean, it's either way, I was going to be happy with it. But I think Calgary's a good matchup for the Oilers, too. I really think they match up well. You look at the season series, they split 4 games down the middle. You take out the 9-5 game, and that was a really even series all year long. And even in that 9-5 game, the Oilers still put 5 past Jacob Markstrom. So, I think it's going to be probably the best second round series that we'll see.
Awesome. On your scale of 1 to 10, where are you at with your concern about Dry's leg?
I'm about a 5. I mean, I thought he looked really good in Game 7. I think early on he was a bit shaky for sure. Kevin Bieksa during the first intermission made some really good points about how, especially early on in a game, it can be difficult for a player because they're not fully warmed up at that point in time, right? And I think you saw as the game went on, he looked better and better and better. In the second and the third periods, he was skating better. He seemed to be moving a bit better. And I think that was really important for the Oilers. And I saw a TikTok the other day that Draisaitl was spotted at a restaurant in downtown Edmonton.
I saw that one.
Yeah, you saw that one too. Yeah, and apparently he wasn't wearing a walking boot. And if that's the case, that's huge too, because that means he's able to move around, pretty okay. And of course, it's TikTok and it's social media, so you don't want to put too much weight behind it or anything, right? But I think it was a good sign to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're gonna get into a little bit of analytics here. Archibald is a physical presence, but alongside Nugent Hopkins, they have a 36% goals for expected rate. Nuge without Archibald has a 69% rate. I mean, Archibald passes the test when it comes to his hits, but he brings down line offense altogether and is a defensive liability. Where are you sitting on the Archibald train?
Well, Paul, how much time do you got today? Because I could go on for a while. Okay. I'm not a very, very big Archibald guy. To me, the most important thing that matters in the game of hockey is goals. Okay. And at the end of the day, Josh Archibald all year long, and for the last number of years, has gotten outscored on the ice at pretty much a 2-to-1 rate. In my eyes, that is not a good hockey player. Now, I also understand the other side of the coin where, we sit there and say, well, it's playoffs, it's physical, that sort of a thing. Okay, fine. If you want to play Josh Archibald, play Josh Archibald. Don't play him in a big role on the third line, right? Yeah. Like you need your third line to be a good support line for your top 6. And you look at a guy like Nugent Hopkins too. He's a guy who historically has struggled to drive play by himself. He's a very good support player, but he's not a guy who can really take over and drive his own line. So, and Josh Archibald, he's far from being able to do that himself too, right? So I don't necessarily have an issue with playing Josh Archibald in the playoffs. I have an issue with how you're deploying Josh Archibald. If you really want him out there that much, then you put him on your fourth line. You play him 7 or 8 minutes a night, and you let him go bang bodies. And you just pray to God that there's no goals scored against, right? To me, the most important thing in hockey is goals and scoring chances. And he gets heavily crushed defensively and offensively, for that matter, when he's on the ice doing that. And again, it's difficult because I do understand the value from a pure hockey standpoint of the physicality and the energy that a guy like him will bring. But again, I mean, when you're getting outscored at 2-to-1 rate, I mean, it sucks. And I think the Oilers got lucky in that first round to get out, running Nugent Hopkins and Archibald without any damage. I mean, at 5-on-5, they were on for 1 goal for, and that was Nugent Hopkins' goal. I think it was in game 3 or game 4 in that blowout game. Yeah. One of those blowout games. I think it was one of those 2. So that's the only time Archibald was on the ice. And it's frustrating when I see a guy like Jesse Puljujärvi, for example, who's basically the anti-Josh Archibald in any sense of the term, right? He's a big guy, but he's not necessarily physical. But at the end of the day, he's outscoring opponents at a 2-to-1 rate when he's on the ice. He's outscoring chancing opponents at a 2-to-1 rate when he's on the ice. So what would you rather have? The guy that looks good on the ice but is getting crushed, or maybe the guy who's a little bit awkward and is absolutely dominant out there? To me, I think the answer is pretty clear.
I don't know what you ate for breakfast, because you definitely have psychic powers, because literally on my notes was about Puljujärvi, because I was going to say, if we flip the script on a different player, Puljujärvi, he's not the guy that gets, highlight packs coming out of commercial with his hits or with his play, but from an analytics eye, he literally makes every single line mate that he plays alongside better offensively and defensively. And there was an interesting article or an interesting graphic from the Athletic that shows hits isn't forechecking, and like it shows Cassian's and Archibald's hits versus their forechecking rates versus Puljujarvi's hits versus forechecking rates. And Puljujarvi, like, you can combine Archibald and Cassian's stats, and it doesn't even come close to what Puljujarvi's doing from a forechecking standpoint. I mean, I feel like I already got the answer, but at the pool party, are you diving in? Are your toes in? Or are you reaching for a life raft?
Oh yeah, I'm all in. I'm at the bottom of the pool. Yeah, like I'm off the top board and I'm all the way in. He's my favorite player on the team. That says a lot when you got a guy like Connor McDavid out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think with Puljujarvi, he is awkward to watch. He really is. He's this big, lanky. He looks like a baby giraffe out there on the ice. But if you really slow down the game and you really watch what he does so many smart things out there. He's not the best player with the puck on his stick, but when he does have the puck on his stick, he's either making a cross ice pass to McDavid and catching him in stride, or he's dumping the puck into the offensive zone into a place where McDavid can go and get it or Kane can go and get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, players like Puljujarvi are so important. You have to have good support players that can play without the puck. You look at the ground that Puljujarvi just covers. Like he's huge out there and he takes up so much space. I understand it's hard and it can be frustrating to watch him sometimes. You want to see him bury some more chances, of course, that goes without saying. But this guy is still only 24 years old. Like,
Yeah. I think
he's still a younger player in the NHL at the end of the day, and he's only 2 years back from Finland. And I think to see the numbers that he's been posting, and I think what's important to know too is that a lot of the underlying numbers for him all kind of can show that there can be positive regression coming back the other way in his game. And I think that's something that, we'll see next year in his game. I think he'll really elevate next year, get a really good offseason in Edmonton here. But right now, I mean, there's no reason that he should be sitting on the bench. And I know there's some rumors out there that he's injured. Nothing I've seen is credible in that regard, but that could also explain if there was something wrong with him, why maybe he's getting less minutes out there. But even when I watch him on the ice, he's still incredibly effective. His underlying numbers in first round series are great. He controlled 66% of the shot attempts, right around the same for expected goal numbers. And that's all the while playing only, maybe 8 or 9 minutes a game.
Yeah, it's just like I think my friend made an interesting point that it's just hard to watch someone like him have to look down before he shoots the puck. It's just like it's a bit of it's a slow growing pain, I should say.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And I mean, I think that's one element of his game where it's like, okay, yeah, go back this offseason and work on it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the beauty of it. People are so ready to write him off and say, oh, well, he's done in Edmonton. Well, why wouldn't you just say, hey, yes, go work on your power skating this offseason and go shoot $1,000 a day.
Yeah.
And just work on those sorts of things instead of wasting away what is an incredibly valuable asset to this team. Mm-hmm. Especially as you mentioned earlier too, with the fact that he elevates every player around him. Like he makes Connor McDavid a better player on the ice. And I don't care what your eye test says, math doesn't lie. Numbers don't lie at the end of the day. So it's frustrating to see a lot of the response that's out there about him. And as I'm sure you see on my Twitter all the time, it is an absolute firestorm anytime I even say his name. So never a dull moment for sure.
Some Black Aces got called up to the Oilers. Big names including Holloway, Broberg, Samorukov, Nemo Linen, Brad Malone, Stuart Skinner, and Seth Griffin. I will say their names, and you will give me a 1 to 10 scale on how likely they are to play a game in the playoffs.
Okay.
Let's first start off with the big dog, Dylan Holloway.
3.
Okay. Any reason why 3?
I just have a hard time seeing the Oilers trusting him at this point in time, and I don't necessarily agree with it. I would like to see him in the lineup. I think he'd be great on the third line to come in and play in a support role right away. The Oilers have clearly felt that he needs more time to develop, and I think leaving him in Bakersfield was the right move. I just don't know if I see the Oilers eager to throwing him to the Wolves, so to speak, in what's going to be a brutal series here.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's also from Calgary, so I think It'd be
Yeah, he is. He's
we have
Calgary Break Creek area.
we have our own Jerome McGinley
Yeah,
coming next
exactly.
week. Do you see Broberg playing a game?
Only if there's an injury. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they decide to go 11-7. But if they go 11-7, I think it's Chris Russell that draws in the lineup before Broberg does. So, I think for Broberg, maybe he's got a bit of a higher chance. Like maybe I'll say like a 5 or a 6. That's probably dependent on how the Oilers feel they could deploy him and whether or not there's any injuries, knock on wood,
Yeah.
to the back end here in the second round.
I know Sam Marukov had the shaky NHL debut, but do you just see him more as a practice squad player more than just popping into a game?
Yeah, I'll put him at a 0. Broberg and Niemelainen would be ahead of him on the draw into the game depth chart.
I'm assuming since we're gonna ride the hot hand, I doubt that Stuart Skinner will get any runtime.
Yeah, no, Skinner will be there just for practices. Same thing with Olivier Rodrigue. Stuart Skinner will probably be the emergency backup that hangs out in the building.
And I thought it would be interesting, Seth Griffin as a 13th or 14th forward, just maybe switching out the fourth line pairing if there's something different that doesn't look right on the ice. I thought he may be an interesting wild card heading into this series.
Yeah, I mean, I for me probably same thing, probably a 0 or a 1. I mean, he didn't play any games with the Oilers this year. Actually, that's not true. He played like one game. He played like 10 minutes time on ice, but I don't really necessarily see him drawing in a lineup. Same sort of thing. I think Devin Shore is a guy who would draw in first, and honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Shore in the regular lineup, even over Josh Archibald at this point in time. I think Shore's a guy who really turned his season around under Woodcroft. But yeah, I think Griffith will be hard pressed to kind of draw into any games.
I know that you have some series bets I saw on Twitter, but do you have any game one bets heading into the day?
Not yet, actually. You know what? That's something that I'll be diving into a little bit here. I think I kind of like the over. I'm not exactly sure what the line is quite yet on it. Let me just pull it up really quickly here. I don't know. I think that might be a good way to go. It could seem like a game that really kind of gets off running right off the get-go. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard to go against McDavid over 1.5 points. I mean, you look at the way he's been in this series against LA, he was almost automatic, right? Yeah, McDavid over 1.5 points and -125. I think that's going to be a lock for me here tonight. And honestly, I wouldn't mind even going with Nugent Hopkins to get a point, -130. Nugent Hopkins is a guy who historically has had a lot of success against the Calgary Flames. And I think he's a guy who could be, a really important piece of the puzzle here, especially if the Oilers decide to go and keep Leon Draisaitl on Connor McDavid's way. Then you can run a second line of Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, and Kane, and those are some guys that can be really effective out there.
Mm-hmm. You kind of also started going into the same question. I know it's putting you kind of on the spot, but if you're Jay Woodcroft, do you have a starting lineup in mind? Would you do something different, pulling the strings different, or would you keep similar to what you saw Game 7?
I would keep the 11-7 that you ran in Game 7. I really think it was effective in the ability to roll Connor McDavid a little bit more and get him a couple more minutes of ice time in the bottom 6. I mean, you got a player who's the best player in the world, and he has no problem playing 24 minutes a night. He really doesn't.
As per Tippett.
I mean, right? Yeah, you looked at it, and Tippett would run him ragged. And in the playoffs, of course, you got to be concerned about everything in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, he's such a great player out there, and he's a guy who thrives when he's active. And I think, this is a good opportunity here to get some good matchups against the Calgary Flames bottom 6 that I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on them. I think that they're a good group. I think they're a deep team. But I still have some question marks. And I think people are really discrediting the Edmonton Oilers in this series. I think when you look at it, this was a series that was pretty even all season long, like I mentioned. And at the end of the day, what were the Oilers? 4 wins behind the Flames at the end of the season. I mean, that's solid, right? But yeah, if you can get McDavid out there against, third or fourth line minutes, you get him out there against Lucic and Trevor Lewis when you got the matchup advantage. I mean, that's a good opportunity for the Oilers to try and, generate offense in a little bit of a different way.
The Battle of Alberta, teams and fans dislike each other, and dislikes the most PG way I can put it. I'd like to change the narrative this morning. Putting your Oilers bias aside, can you say something positive about the Flames that worry you as an Oilers fan?
Yeah, Jacob Markstrom.
Mm.
Honestly, he's probably the worry for me. I think he's going to be. I think this series is going to come down to goaltending, and whichever goaltender can get hot at the right time is the goal. Is the team that can win this series. I think both teams match up really well offensively and defensively. I think the Oilers have the edge in the top six without a doubt. I might give the Flames a bit of an edge in the bottom six because I really like Yarncroc and Dubé. On the
Mm-hmm.
back end, I think it's a toss up for both teams. The Flames, they are probably a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger. The Oilers, maybe a little bit on the smaller side, but much more active and with an ability to move the puck. But so looking at that, it really comes down to the goaltending, right? It's Mike Smith and Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom's probably the biggest worry that I have. Obviously, he's had a season good enough for him to get a top three spot in the Vezina race, much deserved. But yeah, that's probably the one spot that I think would concern me the most.
And second last question. For the Dallas Calgary series, Goudreau had 2 goals, one of them being a penalty shot, and Kachuk scored a goal in Game 7. Does that their top guys not maybe being so much productive on the offensive end, does that shine a light to where the Oilers could take advantage of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that their stars went cold in the first round was a big concern for the Flames and why it took 7 games for them to get out of that series. I think the Oilers can absolutely take advantage of that. And I think that, I mean, as good as Matthew Kachuk can be at times, I think he was also very distracted in that first round series. You look at all the antics that went on with him and Michael Raffle and John Klingberg and the discussions on and off the ice. I don't think Kachuk had a very good series at all. I don't think Goudreau had a great series at all either. Lindholm, I mean, he's a solid, steady center, but you know, I really think the Oilers can have the advantage and take the upper hand here. And McDavid is a guy who historically has had success against the Flames' top line in matchups in the past, especially this season here. Really the top six, it's either Lindholm or Backlund who are out there against McDavid on any given day. And McDavid has kind of feasted on those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's going to be interesting to see. And I think that's the one spot, too, that can be a difference maker on top of the goaltending.
For sure. And we're just wrapping up. Last question. I'm saving the most juiciest question for last. You're putting everything on the line for the internet. What is your series prediction?
Oilers in 7.
Oh.
Yeah, I got Oilers in 7.
If it goes to 7, are you driving over?
Oh man, I'd love to. That'd be so much fun. It'd be great to take the trip down for a game. Honestly, I think this is a game. I think this is a series that goes 6 or 7 games.
Mm-hmm.
I've put my money where my mouth is. I've bet on the Oilers in 7. I've bet on the series to go 7 games. So I just think it's going to be a slogfest. I really do, Paul. It's going to be a battle for both of these teams, and it very well might come down to home ice advantage. And whichever team can get a win on the road first, they might be the team that is able to take the series as a whole. But yeah, my prediction is Oilers in 7.
All right, you heard it here from Zach. Zach, thank you so much for joining me on this. I know you're probably a busy guy around the office. Yeah, it's just thank you so much.
Yeah,
For
my
doing
pleasure,
this.
Paul. Thanks for having me. And anytime you need the guest, don't hesitate to reach out. I love hopping on and doing these sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely in the off season where we'll do some money talk.
I love it.
some
That sounds great.
some of the R phase. Once again, Zack Laing on Twitter, ZJLAING. Great follow. Always has clips about goals and everything Oilers related. Zach, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Sounds great, Paul. Thanks for having me.